Welcome to the Anxious Child Podcast, the podcast that helps you best work with anxious kids and teens. Now, here's your host, Stephen Quinlan.
Today on the show, we have our first episode of The Parents' Corner, and I'm happy to welcome Paula. Paula is the mom of 3 children. The eldest 2 have had struggles with anxiety and depression. She chronicles her journey as a parent through helping them navigate their difficulties. It's a conversation that encourages people and families to be open and honest about their struggles and mental health. As you'll see, Paula does a wonderful job with creating a culture within her family of openness and close-knit ties with each other, all of which help her kids get back to enjoying their lives after going through some significant struggles. We also cover how life transitions such as going off to college and the effects of the pandemic can trigger mental health difficulties. I'm really grateful to Paula for her openness and for sharing the story with hopes that it will help other parents who are going through similar issues. Before we dive into the show, I think we can all agree that we don't need to add any extra anxiety to our already hectic lives. And you know something that causes anxiety is clutter, especially cord clutter. Mount Genie at mountgenie.com makes clever tech accessories and mounting solutions for your Alexa, Google Home, video game consoles, and all brands of Wi-Fi mesh router networks. They rein in that messy cord clutter in your home or in your office. Mount Genie also has organizational solutions for your keys, remotes, sunglasses, and more. Most install without tools in minutes and won't cause damage to the walls. Mount Genie is a family-owned company solving your cord clutter problems. Check them out today at mountgenie.com. All right, so now we welcome into our first episode of The Parents' Corner, Paula. Enjoy. All right, welcome, Paula. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your perspective as a parent. I think it's really valuable for a lot of people. And I'd love to hear your story of kind of what that's been like for you. But before we do that, if you want to just give us a little bit of basic background information about yourself and who you are and how old your kids are and that kind of thing, that'd be great.
Okay, great. I am a mother and I have 3 children. I have a son who is 15, a daughter who is 19, and another daughter who is 21. I am currently living in Maine and I am a substitute teacher. I usually work 2 to 3 days a week in usually middle school at the schools here, and it's quite rewarding. I love working with the kids. So I'm busy on the days off, walking my dog and taking hikes here on the Greenbelt.
Nice. Sounds great. So, and when did you feel like that you first noticed that any of your kids were having any anxiety? It's the 2 older ones, correct?
Yes, my 2 daughters both have anxiety. And the oldest one has more kind of depression, but anxiety as well. Yeah. Okay. So my 3, or the 2 girls, especially, I'll be focusing on them. They both went through high school and were pretty active in school, did sports, great grades they got, and everything was pretty fine. No, signs of having anxiety or depression. We first noticed my middle one, Avery, that she went off to college, and it was her first year of college in upstate New York. So she was about 7-8 hours away, and she went to college and she started to get really stressed out, have feelings of being kind of anxious and everything. She hadn't had that when she was home in high school at all. She was, very confident. So it was very surprising, her calling all the time upset. feeling homesick. And as the freshman year progressed, she started to get more anxiety, and it kind of got worse. And we went up for a parents' visit, and she said, "Oh, I love college, but I like being home with you guys so much better because then I don't have to get stressed out. You guys do everything for us. And now I'm on my own and I have to do everything for myself. And it's so stressful. And I'm stressed out about getting bad grades. I'm stressed out about all of the things that I have to do by myself that you used to do for me." So it was a bit surprising because she was so self-sufficient and so confident at home. And then to move into a environment where she was responsible for everything herself. And it was hard for me as a parent because here I'm getting, it's supposed to be the best time of her life going to college. And I'm getting all these phone calls of her crying, being anxiety ridden, and having a really, really hard time. So that was really difficult because she's 8 hours away and there's nothing I can do except for just be there for her and answer the phone calls and tell her everything's going to be great and it'll be fine. She'll get used to it. She'll do great. So as the semester progresses, she had some life things going on at college with friendships and things like that got her a little bit stressed out as well. And I think just kind of added to the anxiety. So she started to, it was around when she was going to come back for Christmas break. So she had been freshman year and made it through, did very well. Her grades were awesome. She had lots of friends. She was on the swim team. So she had a sport, which was great. And she started to have the anxiety getting higher and higher and higher. And on her way home she was going to fly home, she actually started to have like anxiety attacks where she would start to sweat. Her heart would start to race. She started to feel like panicked and actually started like hyperventilating. And apparently the cause of it was she was so stressed out to fly by herself, to get on an airplane, to fly, to come back to Boston. And so she actually started having like anxiety attacks where she would get this like a pent up stress and be worrying to the extent where she was sweating and like panicking herself. And she also started to have trouble sleeping as well, which was a big one, because I think if you're not sleeping, then everything seems worse. Yep. So that was really tough. But I think what to me really pushed it over the edge to me that she really needed help was when she started to have these anxiety attacks, because that went from like her just feeling anxiety and crying and things like that to being to the point where she was like actually having anxiety attacks and it was affecting her life in a negative way. So she came home for the break and was telling me all about how she'd been having these anxiety attacks. And some of them, were kind of real, of like the flying, that she got stressed out about that. But then she had ones earlier that she didn't tell me about that were things just like stressing out about an exam and having this feeling of worry that she just couldn't control and having other anxiety attacks. So I guess that really concerned me. And so to the point where she had been having it all semester. So we went in to talk to her primary care doctor. We just went in to kind of talk to him about what she was feeling. Not sure whether she needed to take some medicine or what. So we went in to talk to him, and Avery told him how she felt and about these anxiety attacks and how it was affecting her life and in a negative way, and that she really wanted this to stop. And that she was stressing out about school, but she was doing very well in school. She was getting all A's. So it was kind of this worry, but she didn't really need to be worrying, or she had extreme worry over her swimming. She was on the swim team and she would get extremely worried about like a practice because she wouldn't have a great practice. And then she would get really stressed out about that. So the doctor recommended that she see a therapist. Mm-hmm. And he also recommended that she take a small amount of Zoloft. Zoloft. Yeah. I take a small dosage of Zoloft and see how that felt. So Avery was all for it because she really wanted help.
Yeah.
She did not like the way that she was feeling. I, as a parent, just, wanted her to feel good about herself and to not have these anxiety attacks. I mean, it was to the point where really affecting her and her college life. And I wanted her to be able to go back to college and to be successful and to enjoy her last semester of freshman year. So we started her on the Zoloft. And she also she went to a therapist, I think it was twice here. And then he set her up to see the therapist up at school. So she went to school in upstate New York. So we found a counselor that was through the medical office there on campus.
Right.
Avery started seeing her as well, which was really kind of nice to be taking the medicine and to be seeing a therapist. Mm-hmm. And then the doctor also told her that if she takes fish oil, the omega-3 fatty acids, that sometimes that can help with anxiety and depression. So she started on that as well. She was like, I'll do whatever I have to do. I want to feel better.
Yeah. Mm.
So we started on that. And I did ask her, what were the things that this therapist told you to do? What kinds of things did they do? Because I'm not a huge advocate of just giving people medicine and that's it, and hoping for, an answer. So the big things that the therapist told her was that she needed to have a healthy diet. What she's putting into her body was important. She needed to try to have good sleep. Mm-hmm. And we actually started doing some like aromatherapy things for her. She started to do like lavender spray on her pillow at night and things like that to just help her calm. And so she could have better sleep. And also they told her to start maybe doing some like tea at night. So she would have a cup of chamomile tea and that might help relax her. And so then she would have a better sleep. So she did that. Exercise, which was a huge one, that she needed to be exercising every day for her well-being and just her health. Also, deep breathing. They worked a lot with her on breathing. Like when she starts to feel that anxiety, she starts to feel that panic, her heart starts racing, to work on deep breathing and to calm herself down and calm her body. So I know there was a lot of work on that as well. So I feel like she got some good habits out of seeing the therapist up at school. And I think with the combination of the Zoloft, it's really helped Avery a lot. She is doing very well right now. I can report that she has not had any full-blown anxiety attacks since last year, which is really great. She did actually just fly on an airplane yesterday.
Oh.
And she said she got a little bit of a panic and started to sweat a little bit. And she made it, she did it, but she didn't have like a full-blown anxiety attack. She was able to calm herself down through some deep breathing. And she said that really helped. The other thing that this therapist worked with Avery on, which I think is an interesting thing, is that she would say to Avery, okay, what's the worst thing that can happen? All right, you're stressed out. What's the worst case scenario? What is it? Like, okay, you're stressed out about this exam. Okay, say you don't do well on the exam. So what's going to happen? What do you do? And so she would kind of walk her through, like, how would you deal with this worst case scenario if it happened? Is it really that bad? What would you do then? And Avery said that really helped her a lot because she realized that some of the anxiety she was feeling, like the worst case scenario, wasn't so bad, that she could actually take care of it herself. She could do this. it would be okay.
It's interesting that she went from a place of what would seem to be in some ways kind of quote unquote normal anxiety, that you're going off to college and that there's this big life transition. And as you said, there are all these things that you have to deal with now that your parents have been taking care of for a long time. And that feels like a big weight. And it went from being, I guess, sort of in that realm to once she started having the panic and anxiety attacks, that took it to that place of, all right, we've got to do something about this. And also, if you ever ask anybody who's ever had a panic attack, it's like it's so terrible and feels so bad. They want to do anything to try and make that go away. So all these things you kind of started to try and do, from diet to, exercise and the therapy and the medicine and all that, I think kind of speaks to just how bad that feels when you're in that place.
Yeah, definitely. She's such a bright girl and has so much to offer. It was just so hard to see her in that state. And it worried me so much. I spent so many nights not able to sleep and worrying and feeling this, like there was nothing that I could do. I was so happy when she came home and was willing to get that help to figure it out. And like I said, she's doing great right now. We're so proud of her. She actually is taking a big leap of faith, and she is planning on going to Italy next spring. Oh, she's going to study in Italy, in Rome. And it's a big thing for her because she will be on her own. And she's decided she can take that jump, and she wants that experience. And she's really excited for it. She's scared and she's nervous, but she feels like she's capable of that. And I'm so happy for her to do this. And I know it's a big thing because she will be by herself and navigating in a city where, she doesn't really know the language, and with new people, new experiences, but she's embracing it. So it's wonderful.
Wow, that's great. It's interesting that she went from, having the difficulty with the short little plane ride from upstate New York to, she said she just went on one the other day, but also that's obviously an even longer plane ride to Italy. Right. And then for her, and also for you, that distance of a 7-hour drive to, I don't know how long it takes to fly to Italy, but I'm assuming it's probably like maybe a 7-hour plane ride, but what a big difference. So it's wonderful to hear, because I think that really shows you how much better she's feeling.
Yeah. And I think she knows it too. Like, she feels it. She's confident in herself, and she's really she's happy about it. It's a big deal for her. And I'm so glad she's doing it. So yeah, she's doing really well. And then I guess that moves me into my other daughter.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll start a little bit on her. My oldest daughter is a senior in college, and she is 21, almost 22. She's a go-getter. She's definitely full of life. Does everything. And so I haven't had to worry about her as much in college. She gets great grades. She is a biochemistry major, and she's far away. She's like 8 hours away in Pennsylvania, and she loves it. Very independent. She's a Division I track and cross country runner. So she's really busy. She's a tour guide at college, so she does that. And then she's also a TA for a biology class as well. So she's super busy, constantly doing things. She's also in a sorority. So she is just go-getter. Like, as much as she can get her hands on to do, she does. So she's been very successful at college, doing great, really happy. Hers is a story of like ongoing depression, and it didn't start until the pandemic. She happy-go-lucky, doing everything amazing. And then last spring, she was spending the semester abroad in Denmark for school, studying biology, traveling, having an amazing, amazing time. And due to COVID, she was forced to come home early from her program. And it was very, very traumatic for her, very sad, because she had a trip planned to Italy. She had a trip planned to Paris. She had all these wonderful trips planned. And then because of COVID, everything closed down and she had to come home and not even go back to school. She just had to come back home to Maine. So it was kind of a big loss for her to have to come home, to be in Maine when she really wanted to be in Denmark. So that kind of was the first loss for her, I think. And then she kind of kept it together over the summer and had a couple jobs and was working. And then fall came of her senior year and school announced that it was going to be remote. So everything would be remote because of COVID. And she and her senior friends all decided, okay, we're going to go to campus and we're going to live off campus and take our classes remotely, but we'll be there together just so that we can have that camaraderie during our senior year. So that's what she did. And I thought it was a great plan. And so she went off to Lafayette and everything was fine until she started her first week of remote classes and was diagnosed with COVID. Oh. So she had already had COVID in March when she came home from Denmark. So we thought it was a bit odd that she had it again. So they put her into isolation and she had to sit in isolation for, it was 10 to 12 days all by herself in this, basically this little box. And they delivered food to her and everything. And so she was all alone for 11 days. And it was very hard. She couldn't exercise in there and they wouldn't let her out of isolation. So she spent all this time in isolation. She finally got out of isolation and they tested her and she didn't have COVID. So she found out she had just spent 10 days in isolation and she didn't have COVID.
For no reason.
Yeah. So this was the start for our daughter of some serious depression. She was a 21-year-old in isolation for 11 days. And really, it was very taxing on her. And then she came out of isolation and there was no sorority. There was no running. There's no touring. There's no, all of the things that she did that she loved, there was nothing. So it was really hard on her to just be doing remote classes and sitting in front of the computer all day long. And very isolating as well, because then other people on campus were being put into isolation as well and all kinds of things. So the semester continued and she got diagnosed with COVID again. And they put her into isolation again. Mm-hmm. And so we called the school and asked if she could be retested, because how could she possibly have COVID 3 times? Right. And this is just not healthy for a young lady at 21 years old to be in isolation again. Mm-hmm. So they retested her and it did come back that it was a false negative. Mm. They didn't really know what to do because she was the only person that this had happened to. Mm. She fell into depression and was not herself. And it was not great at all. I won't go into all the details of that, but basically mm-hmm. she spent twice in isolation for having COVID, and neither of the times she had COVID. Mm-hmm. So that was just really traumatic for her. So she ended up coming home at Thanksgiving, and she was a very different person than the person we all knew. She was sleeping hours and hours and hours of the day away. She was withdrawn. She was watching series on Netflix, just one after another after mm-hmm. another. She was not exercising, which is not like her because she's so into her sports. Mm-hmm. She didn't seem to have any motivation. And it was probably a couple weeks after she was home at Thanksgiving. And the whole family, we were all like, Leave is not herself. This is not great. She seems very depressed. And, we kind of need to do something. So her sister, Avery, having been through what she went through with her anxiety and a little bit of depression, said, hey, Mom, I think we need to help Leave out. She seems very depressed. And I agreed. So we got her an appointment with her doctor and went in and talked about it. And the doctor said that apparently this is quite common for kids in college because of the pandemic to have this, what did she call it? I think it's called situational depression.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Is what she called it. I'm not sure of the term, but basically because of her being so active and to go to having nothing, it can cause a depression. Whereas like she told Leave that like had, COVID not being going on, she might not have had this depression, but because of the situation of her having no cross country, having no tour guides, having no classes in person, being in front of the computer all day long, this can cause depression from certain people. And there's no way of knowing whether, it would have happened on its own or not, but that she felt like Leave needed to have some therapy as well as she should take some medicine, a low dose of some medicine to kind of help her body get back into a normal, a normal place. Mm-hmm. So Leave was so desperate that she agreed that she would take something. And she's the kind of person that is anti taking anything. She was super scared, but we all were saying to her, what do you have to lose? Right. You don't feel well. You are so unhappy. And she was very clear of how depressed and how unhappy she was. Mm. And that she did not like how she was feeling and felt like she was just wasting her time, watching TV and being depressed and feeling horrible. And as a parent, again, I was at a loss because I would try to encourage her, go for a run. Why don't you go for a walk? You'll feel better. Why don't you do something with one of your friends? But truly, she did not have the energy or the motivation to actually do anything. Mm-hmm. And so once, we saw that, Avery, I think was a big push of like, you need to take something. You need to try taking something. I think it'll really make a big difference. Really, this is because of what's going on with COVID right now. You're losing a lot of things. Your life is not normal. Can't do all of the things that you used to do. So she started on Prozac. Uh-huh. She started a low dosage of Prozac. She started therapy. She had a very negative experience with a therapist. So I have to say that did not go very well. Okay. The doctor gave her a name of somebody in the practice that she could go to, and it was not a good fit for her. Mm-hmm. The therapist, she really wanted someone to kind of give her, to listen and to kind of give her ideas of things that could help her so she wasn't so depressed. And this particular woman took the path of she was going to do worksheets with her and have her, I don't know, it was not what Leave was interested in. And she also tried to force her into group therapy. And my daughter this was a big enough deal for her just to go to therapy herself, let alone be in front of an entire group of people and talk about how depressed she was. Right. And so for Leave, the therapy did not go very well, unfortunately. But she did start the Prozac, and I would say within a month, she started to feel much better. It was like a little switch just went off in her brain. I'm not sure what happened, but she started to feel more like herself. She started laughing again, being funny. She forced herself to exercise every day, and went out for her runs, and was trying to be more social, getting, I guess, out of the house and doing things with us. I mean, it's hard to be social when COVID's going on, but, more social, I guess, with her family. So we started to do things together more, and she would participate in them, like, okay, let's go to the beach. Let's go for a walk. Let's go for a hike. And slowly but surely, she pulled herself out of that depression. And she is now back at college. And I have to say, it's a little bit more normal now at college. Most of her classes are still remote. So she's in her spring term of her senior year. And most of the classes are still remote. She has one that's in person, but she's back to doing her tours on school. She's back to tutoring again. Her track is back in force. So they're safely doing track. And May 1st, she has her Patriot League championship. So she has her last track meet of her season, which is amazing. So I think she's back to herself, which is really nice to see. Busy, doing things, passionate for what she's doing, back into her life. And I don't know. I don't know the answer, but I do know that for her, being back and participating in her life is just so important, because now she's just so much happier.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it helps not to be in a box for 11 days or whatever it was. I mean, it's really, it's kind of, it feels almost silly to talk about it, but you just imagine what that's like. I mean, people are put into solitary confinement as an extreme punishment for a reason. So we're not meant to be in that place. And so much of what you're describing, things that are going on during the pandemic, are definitely unnatural for human beings. There's a lot of response in terms of depression or anxiety or what have you. I also think it's really interesting that your younger daughter went through what she went through with the anxiety, which also was spurred on by the environmental circumstances that were going on for her at that point. But she was able to help your older daughter kind of push through some of that in terms of getting help. Like that she had that first positive experience, and that helped her really to encourage her sister. The other thing is the fit of the therapist that you mentioned. I mean, it's it's unfortunate that it wasn't a good fit, for your older daughter, but I always encourage people to, if it feels that way, to just go somewhere else, that you're not sort of tied to one person, because everybody's different. We kind of either vibe with people or we don't. So I hope that hasn't sort of turned her off from therapy completely. If, she feels like down the road, she wants to go chat with somebody or something.
Yeah, I think it did turn her off, but I don't think it permanently will turn her off. Only in the fact that I actually see a therapist myself. And I am a big advocate, I think, because the kids see me in therapy and know that I go to therapy, and I make it quite clear to them that it's really helpful, and that it took me. I went to many, I kind of shopped around until I found the right fit. And I've been seeing the therapist that I go to for probably 3 years now. We saw each other very regularly in the beginning, and now less, just because I don't need to as much. I've made it really clear to my children that it's been so helpful and so beneficial to me. So I will encourage my daughter Leave to give it a try again. And I tried to encourage her, but I think she was so turned off initially, and then she was going back to college, so it was a little bit more complicated. But I do think in the future, I don't think she would be opposed to seeing someone else.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you've created sort of this culture, in your family where it's like, that's acceptable, and it's not something that's looked at as stigmatizing or weak or what have you. I'm curious what I'm thinking about like what you were going through as a parent, especially you mentioned, early on, where I think it was Avery was far away and you just had that feeling of like helplessness. And how did you kind of navigate that yourself? And do you have any tips or ideas that you would pass on to somebody else who might be going through something similar?
Yeah, I have to say, it's really challenging to have your children go off to college, and you kind of just have to let them make their own decisions and take care of themselves. And, they've been under your roof 18 years, and then you let them go, and then you're at home. I really tried for myself. Like I said, I go to therapy. So I did talk to my therapist a lot about these kinds of things. And that was really nice for me because I had a great outlet. Instead of burdening my friends, I could talk to my therapist about these challenges and how I was feeling. And that was really great. I also think as a parent, I also talk to friends. I have a support system here where I live, and I have a group of women that I walk with regularly. And throughout the pandemic, we've still been doing that, socially kind of distancing with our masks, but we walk. And I do think that just having that connection with other parents and talking about that really helps, especially for me, the kind of person I am. I don't like to keep it all bottled inside. And I think, it's kind of it happens to a lot of children. They are at home and then they go to college and it's overwhelming and it's a lot to handle and they have to kind of rely on themselves. And I think this is common for kids. And as I started to talk about that and started to, voice how I was feeling, I realized with other friends that have kids in college, they go through the same things. So I really think having an outlet of being able to talk about it really helped. I am a worrier, whereas my husband doesn't worry as much, or he doesn't outwardly worry as much. It's actually, we're, I guess, a good combination because I worry about all these things. And then he's the voice of reason, kind of like, she's going to work it out. She's going to figure it out, like this kind of thing. So I think being able to talk about it with your spouse is important as well. And just being there to listen to my daughter, I think was important. Like she knew she could call me at any time and I would be there to listen, whether she was crying or whether she was joyful or sad or anything. So it was really good. And in the beginning, like she literally called me all the time. My phone was just ringing nonstop. And then when things started to get better for her, I heard from her less, which made me a little bit sad because I was kind of missing her. But then I realized, okay, she's not texting me so much and she's not calling me so much because she's doing better. She's doing what she's supposed to be doing. She's, with her friends, she's hanging out, she's swimming, she's doing those kind of things. So I think, hang in there because, it does get better. And just, I think being there for your children to listen to them and to help them when they're asking for that help. Like I really wasn't sure what to do to help my children. But that's why I brought them into their doctor. Like, okay, what do we do? How do we navigate this? What can we do? And I don't pretend to have all the answers, but luckily for both of my kids, they're both doing really well now. Obviously, I think they have their slips. Avery can have feelings of anxiety, but I think she realizes that she can manage it now and she has tools for dealing with it. So that's really helpful.
Well, it's not only have you, as I mentioned earlier, created that kind of culture where it's like, it's acceptable that, A, these things are happening, and also B, that it's not only okay to talk about it, but it's encouraged to talk about it. And you're there as a resource for them. And even the siblings are there as a resource for each other, because I think that just kind of permeates out to everybody. Also, just from a more macro perspective, I think societally and culturally, mental health has much less of a stigma than it used to, even 10 years ago. So that's very helpful. But there was one little thing too that you were saying that I thought was really significant. And I'm sure that parents who are sort of turning their kids out, from the nest into the wild, so to speak, oftentimes struggle with. And that's being able to let go of those phone calls, that where she was at a point that she had to be in kind of constant contact with you. I think as a parent, sometimes there's that inclination to be like, oh, come on back and we'll, take care of you. And they would do all these things because that's what you've been doing for so long as just a conscientious parent. So it's hard to let that go, but you're doing it because as you said, that she's doing better. And as much as you in some ways enjoy those conversations because she needs you, etc., that for her, that's what needs to happen for her to be the best off that she can be.
Yeah, I really, as a parent, you want your kids to be happy, be successful in whatever it is that they choose. So yeah, it's been a journey for sure. Full of a lot of worry. I do think that luckily you were talking about how the kids have each other. My 3 kids are very close. They keep in constant contact. We have a family email thread that we fill up on a daily basis, jokes and family things. But I do think that my kids really are very close, which is nice for them. So I think that they always know that, their brother will be there for them or their sister will be there for them. And that's a really great connection because sometimes, they don't feel comfortable saying certain things to their parents, but they might feel comfortable saying it to their siblings because there's no judgment there. There's no embarrassment or anything like that. So I do think having connections like that are really important for kids.
Yeah. And the power of what your siblings say to you and your peers is much different than, what your kind of naggy old parents are saying to you all the time.
Yep.
So I agree. That's a great support for them. Well, thanks so much for being so open and sharing your story. And I think there's a lot to take away from it in terms of things that you can do to help your kids if they're going through, some anxiety or some depression, certainly related to pandemic or just, life transitions, these things that come along that are challenging, that can sometimes induce anxiety or panic or depression. So that's really appreciated.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I hope this can help some parents out there.
All right, that was Paula. Thanks again to her for coming on and for being so open, with the hope that this will help other families who are going through similar struggles. She had a lot of great suggestions in there, so I'm hopeful that you were able to glean some of that from the episode. So that's it for today. Be well, take care, and be in touch.
This podcast is not intended as medical or psychological treatment. In no way should it replace treatment from a mental health professional.